Good evening, paranormal community, and thank you for partaking in this very special episode of the Odyssey Files. I am your host, Michael O'Neill. With me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. David Storey. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Mike. How are you on this beautiful summer Thursday? I find myself here at an odd time.
Yes, you are. And I'm doing wonderful. And that's all the chit chat we're going to do for today.
That's it. That's all I made it nice and easy.
Because the reason for this very special episode of the Odyssey Files is our guest tonight, who was the executive producer and showrunner of season 3 of Skinwalker Ranch. Has been the producer of other paranormal shows, including one you might have heard of called Ghost Hunters. So I've been practicing, and over the weeks we have talked about me hacking his name, and I've been practicing as I promised. So, without further ado, I present to you all Mark Marinaccio. Did I do it right?
Yes, you did. Great job. I appreciate the effort.
And believe me, there was a little effort involved.
Oh, yeah.
I am not good when it comes to like last names that I've never seen before. So if it's Johnson, Anderson, I'm all over it.
You don't get a lot of Marinaccios out in Minnesota?
Apparently not.
Few and far between.
Few and far between. And in fact, the only like Italian last name that I've come across in a long time is a former investigator of mine, Infante, and that's pretty easy. So,
well, it is because you got the A at the end, Infante, but he probably had to tell you it was that versus Infant or something like that.
Yes, she actually really had to. She had to say it a few times in order for me to be able to get it properly.
Well, I'm happy to bring some culture to your part of the world.
You are going to bring a lot of light and clarity into our lives here tonight, because the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch has been a topic of conversation between Dave and I for many years. I think even before the show, we had talked about it briefly here and there. But before we get into that, I would like to talk a little bit about your background and how you came to be on Skinwalker Ranch, because that is a very coveted place right now that a lot of people want to get onto.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I had been trying to get to that ranch since George Knapp's book came out in 2005, Hunt for the Skinwalker. I read that book, and at the time I was already, producing and creating shows and pitching a lot of paranormal. And I came across, I said, wow, this would be amazing to go and out there and be able to make a show, out there, me and everybody else, right. That knows about the place. And I couldn't get access. There was just no way. And, in 2005, it was in a weird state. And I spent 15 years pitching every sort of Skinwalker Ranch adjacent idea I could that would get me out there, the property next to it, the Uinta Basin, all these other areas, developed relationships with everybody that had been involved with that part of the world and the ranch, going back for quite some time. And but my story really started way before that. I sort of grew up in this world of unexplained. My mom's psychic and dad big science fiction fan. I always joke I never stood a chance. I was going to be in this world one way or the other. And although I was really more interested in science fiction, when I was in Los Angeles, came to Los Angeles in 2000. At the time, reality TV started popping, right? And so I found myself very quickly in producing in that world. I did a bunch of shows, but then one of the bigger shows that I did was The Ultimate Fighter with UFC guys, and produced on that. And it's Pilgrim, the same company that makes Ghost Hunters. And so on the heels of the season that I did, season 4 of that show, they had asked me to come work on Ghost Hunters as the supervising producer in the field, running the field. And it was funny because I came in, I think it was Tuesday, like a Tuesday, and met, Craig Pelagian and everybody involved. And they hired me there on the spot and said, do you have a passport? Because we need you in Ireland on Thursday. And this was when Ghost Hunters took their first international and only international trip. And we went, Ireland, England, bounced all over the place. And that was really the start of my paranormal producing career. And I've done a lot since then. Some shows people know, some you don't. I did some special episodes of Dead Files. I created and produced a couple of shows, Cursed and Stalked by a Ghost, various other ones that you can see on my IMDb. And then Ghost Hunters International, did a lot of that. But in 2005, when I read the book, I was just like this, I went and did Ghost Hunters because I thought, oh my God, I can actually go and be a part of people catching ghosts on tape. This is unreal. That's real life science fiction. I want to be involved in that and go out there. And it was amazing. Went to places that most people don't get to go, certainly with access that nobody gets, and all over the world. And, but early on, it was funny because early on, the TV making aspect of it sort of, left me a little bit disheartened. Like, when do we really get to hunt for ghosts? There's so much TV stuff I have to do. And I don't know why I thought it would be different. But my interest prior to that really was more aliens and UFOs. When I was a kid and the internet first came out, the first thing I did was start looking up, aliens and UFOs and pyramids on Mars and all that kind of fun stuff, and go down those rabbit holes for days at a time, weeks at a time. And but at the time when I was out in Los Angeles and still am producing, aliens and UFOs just wasn't really an active reality or unscripted show, docu-follow type of show, type of content, because at the time it was these shows are very dependent on having some physical evidence to share and to review and to show. And you really couldn't do that very well, I think, at the time with UFO or alien subject matter. But nevertheless, I was really still very engaged by it and pitching my versions of shows for it. And then I read, Com Kelleher's and George Knapp's book, and I was like, oh my God, this place has everything, right? This is straight out of science fiction, a ranch in the middle of nowhere that's got aliens and Bigfoot and ghosts and portals and spaceships and all kinds of fun stuff, right? Cattle, of course, cattle mutilations. And I dug into it, and I really got, became just well-versed on it and really engaged in it, and spoke to all kinds of people that you could imagine that were, related to the ranch in some way or another. And it's funny because, one of those guys, I don't know if you guys know Ryan Skinner, really, really good guy, Ryan Skinner. He's been on a couple episodes of Skinwalker Ranch and some other things. And he's gone to that ranch and tried to get past the guards for decades, prior to Brandon owning it. And, he's one of the guys who would be like, I was at the ranch and there's armed paramilitary guards in all black uniforms with no insignias. And everyone's like, yeah, right. You're full of shit. Like just another Looney Tunes kook. He's like, no, there's really these guys. And, and then you come to find out, oh yes, that was true. And the government did have active program doing research on Skinwalker Ranch, with Allsap and Bass and Robert Bigelow. And, and it was funny because once that all came out, I sort of think that was a bit of the floodgates opening to the admission of UFOs and UAP and government programs. But, that Ryan was one of these guys who for years, just everyone called crazy. And I talked to him for countless hours, and he had some incredible experiences, and I just was heavily invested. And for the next 15 years I tried to get on that ranch, tried to get a hold of anybody on the part of the ranch, and I can get hold of some people who had been there, but they still couldn't talk about it. But I could not get on the ranch, and I pitched every show adjacent to the ranch, right? Like the surrounding area. Like I could get the property above the ranch and looking down on the ranch. And it wasn't popular enough of a place for executives and entertainment networks to really get behind. They liked sort of the idea of it, but from their perspective and understanding that everything's on the ranch. And if you're not on the ranch, then there's no story and there's no show. So you just couldn't make anything happen. And then the show came out, and then Brandon bought the ranch, obviously. And it was funny because, when he bought the ranch, Adamantium Enterprises, and of course, guys like Ryan Skinner were breaking that, information out to the public. Someone bought the ranch, and it's this organization, and and it's this and that going on. And of course, everyone's like, "Oh, you're full of crap." And he wasn't. And then, Brandon quickly was able to secure the deal with History Channel for the show, and I, had some very close friends and contacts at History Channel because of all my work. And I said to them at the time that it came out, I sort of backed off of going out into the field and producing. I've got a family, and it's grueling, and it beats you up, and it's the hours and the days and the exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional exhaustion just beats you up. And I wanted to be around my family. So I took a step back from going out much into the field. And I said to them, to my friends over there, I said, that's the only show that I would go back out into the field for and run. And at the time they, it already had come up with Prometheus, and they had their team and all that. And then season 3's rolling around, and a good friend of mine was an editor on the show. You guys know him, Jay Blumke, Dark Zone. And they had asked Jay if he wanted to go run it and EP it out in the field and do post. And he couldn't for whatever reason. And he said, but you should talk to Mark. He actually turned me on to Skinwalker Ranch way back when George Knapp's book. I told Jay to read it, and Jay and I, we worked a lot together trying to develop shows with that. So Jay read that book, and he was into it. So they said, okay, I had never met the guys, Prometheus guys before. And so I went in and we hit it off. And of course, everyone, at History knew me. And so they asked me to go out to the field and produce it, and then come back and work in the, in post, and deliver the show. And so that's how I came to, spend those months, 3-4 months, whatever it was on the ranch.
3 or 4 months on the ranch. So that right there leads to about, I don't know, 150 questions, maybe.
Yeah, at some point I will put out a story. 60. I wrote a little article for Alien Con, 60 days on Skinwalker Ranch, and I'll expand on that at some point. But that is the highlights of what I just told you.
So this was obviously, it was owned by Robert Bigelow, who was doing research, and Dave and I have talked a lot about like the $22 million grant that he got from the government and whatnot. And we've all talked about government involvement in what was going on when Bigelow owned it. So, I mean, in your research, in talking with Ryan, especially with him actually seeing like pro-military, probably, very high up Navy SEALs or just shoot to kill type people that you would see at like Area 51. When you heard all this, like, and you read George Knapp's book, and you're researching and you're trying to get on and you can't, and now you have like the military people with their automatic weapons, and did your I guess idea of Skinwalker Ranch and what was going on there start to shift because of that? Or what did you think was the reason behind everything that was going on?
I had assumed that, no, it didn't shift. I had assumed that if what Ryan was saying was true, and I didn't have a reason to disbelieve him, but also didn't have any evidence to believe him. Right. I mean, but that wasn't important at the time. Right. I was just trying to get there for myself. So of course I heard his stories, like I do with everyone, right? Whether it's abductees or experiencers in any way. And I was excited at the idea that there was something there legitimate enough that it warranted a government or military investigation. That was intriguing to me, because then you sort of, it legitimizes it, right? They're not going to go there and look at anything if there's not some value, and they're certainly not going to come back if there's no reason not to believe that there's something there worth studying.
So do you think that Bigelow bought the place solely based on the Shermans' testimony of what happened to them when they owned the ranch? Or do you think it goes deeper than that and the truth just hasn't been revealed yet?
I don't think that the truth hasn't been revealed, but I think it's more, anybody making an investment of that size is definitely going to do their due diligence. And, going back going back a few generations of owners, but Bigelow was also looking at all kinds of properties, right? Like Mount Wilson, which he owned for a while. So it was just what he was doing, by looking into these properties with potential, paranormal or strange activity. And what a lot of what he was after, I think, worked, right? In that, on the heels of that OSAP and Bass contract at Skinwalker Ranch, he started Bigelow Aerospace,
Mhm.
got a contract, so, if that was partially the goal, then that worked. But, he had frightening experiences there at the ranch as well. He isn't, from what I understood, he didn't want to go back. He definitely attributed some tragedies in his life to the ranch, because there's the hitchhiker phenomenon. I think that much like Brandon and myself, and a lot of other people, we're somewhat kids at heart when it comes to this sort of subject matter, right? This is, living in a Spielberg movie when, in the 80s when we're growing up, or Explorers or something like that, and part Indiana Jones, where the idea that these movies and these stories we heard as kids have some validity and some truth, and we can now go explore those as adventurers, and that's really what Brandon is. He's an adventurer in so many ways. And Bigelow and Brandon have resources to be able to fund those adventures. And so I think that, I don't think that necessarily there's something that Bigelow knew about the place that we don't know that he knew before buying it. I'm careful I say that, because that leaves opportunity for him to have found things out while there that we don't know about. And I think that's absolutely the case, just by the nature of it being classified, right? Because anything that they researched and they did during the contract in the military is not public information yet. At least not all of it. There's some things that are, but it's not. And I wouldn't expect it to be yet, right? So who knows what else has come out of there? But we had, I've had decade before he came onto the ranch in my season, I had a relationship with Colonel John Alexander, and we talked extensively about the ranch as well, and what they did, what NIDS did on the ranch prior to the contract in the military was the best they could do at the time, as he says, but nothing like what's going on there now, right? And so my assumption would be that, of course, they were left with the idea that the phenomenon, whatever it is transient, right? Because they just didn't have the equipment to be able to detect a pattern or repeatability, right? So I think the natural assumption that would then be transient. It's moving. It's not in any one place. And they just weren't able to drill down into the science of what the phenomenon was. So I just don't think they came to any conclusions, would be my assumption. And I don't think their interest ever stopped.
No, I'm sure it hasn't.
But I also think that's more unofficial. Nobody who very few people, regardless of their job, let alone working in government, are going to spend time on things they're not getting paid for. So, there's no more funding for research on the ranch from that perspective. So, I think that the ranch is a part of something larger, as far as trying to understand phenomenon and its value to us, or the dangers or the threats. But I don't think it's the only thing.
So I get this question a lot, and I'm of the viewpoint that the whole basin is really a hotspot. And people are like, well, it's just, this, you got this 540 acres. What's so special about that parcel? I don't think it's the parcel. So since you spent time out there, and not saying that the actual ranch isn't important, because obviously it is, but from the time that you spent out there, do you have like stories you can share, or did you see like any commonalities between the ranch and surrounding properties, as far as experiences or UFO sightings, or
Yeah,
hauntings, cryptids,
absolutely.
whatever, I mean, everything's out there. It's like the Disney World of the paranormal.
It really is. It's an
Yeah.
amusement park for paranormal.
It really
No,
is. Yeah.
I will say this, that ranch is one of the most peaceful places I've ever been to in my life. I was shocked at how chill it felt there. Maybe that's got something to do with what's going on. I don't know, but it was very peaceful. And I would specifically, if we're all the way down, like at Homestead, 3 or 1, I guess, depending how you're looking at it, all the way to the other end of the property, doing something at night, when we're done, I'd walk back to the control room by myself in the pitch black with my headlamp and flashlight off, just to try to have some experiences. I just, I wanted it, and I got some, but not really during that. But I went into it strongly believing, and I still do, that while the phenomenon's not specific to just the ranch, you have two things going on. One is it's been an area heavily focused on and inhabited, right? Multiple generations of people and teams and investigations. So just by the fact that you've had observers in this one little parcel of land for an extended period of time, it's logical that that's the place with the most reports of things happening, just because that's where people are the most. It's like if you look at a UFO heat map, populated cities are way more covered in UFO sightings in places that aren't. You need people to observe in order for it to be observed, right? So I think that that's one thing. It's just, there's not a lot of other places on in that area where you've got, for decades long public research and investigation into strange phenomena. And it absolutely, the phenomenon takes place all over the basin. That being said, we did have experiences that led me to believe that perhaps there is a bit of an epicenter, maybe not maybe that's not the right word. I'll call it a hotspot, right? So I don't know if phenomenon is centered at the ranch, or the ranch is a hotspot out of multiple hotspots in that area. But, there's a couple of things that would happen that would make me sort of second guess that this isn't localized. And like, for instance, you just look at the triangle, right? The triangle alone is, it's right in the middle of that ranch, with a phenomenon that's, directly ahead or directly above. And so that while that phenomenon maybe is viewable from multiple perspectives around the basin, that triangle is on the ranch, and there's something going on there with the triangle that is absolutely, there's some phenomenon related to it, right? I mean, there's a lot of theories, and we did a lot of different things. So that, and then, there was one night in particular where we're actually recreating a Bigelow era experiment that Alexander had talked to us about, where we went and tried to dig trenches out in one of the fields where Bigelow dug, and then they would experience phenomenon. And so we did the same thing, brought on the biggest bulldozer the ranch had ever had. And, 1 or 2 passes and this thing died, inexplicably, like everything does out there. And of course, the guys come out like, we just put this and that in it, and there's no reason for it to die, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Then we had the radiation spikes. And so then, we came back later that evening with the intention of sort of trying to stimulate and then observe the area where the bulldozer was and the phenomenon had happened. And that was a night where, we shot a rocket, which is something we did. I noticed very early on, before I came to the ranch that rockets worked. And so Travis and Eric and everybody and I, we all talked a lot about the value in shooting rockets, even just as an exercise and stimulation, regardless of it being part of an experiment or not, because it seemed to trigger phenomenon. And so we shot a rocket. And even before we got down there, we saw this crazy light, like out in the woods. And then I think Caleb and Thomas went running after it, but it disappeared. But then we shot this rocket. And then that's the episode where I had the antenna pointed right where the rocket went in the air and got the 1.65, gigahertz signal. And you couldn't move the antenna a fraction of, an inch in any direction without losing the signal. Right. So it had to be very specific. Okay. That went on for and we flipped on the sound. You heard the noise that everyone knows the sound. And that went on for like an hour. And, as Travis explains, okay, first of all, the Earth rotates. So if it was something out in deep space, we would have rotated away from it. Mm-hmm. Satellites move. It would have been gone in 15 minutes. So it's something localized, pointed at the ranch, right? So that's another thing that makes me say, okay, why is something pointed at the ranch? Now, not jumping to the conclusion of it being UFOs, aliens, or whatever, but there's something focused on the ranch specifically, because it's literally, you could not move that antenna a little bit without losing the signal. It was pointed right at us. And then towards the end of the season, if you guys remember, if you watched it, there was that flash that was caught in the sky. Eric and Travis woke up and Eric went and checked, and there was this flash out in the southern sky that was, as bright as like an exploding star would be. That was only seen from the ranch. That was not seen anywhere else. That was a crazy bright. That was the brightest object in the sky, and it happened multiple times. And so how is it that no one else sees that anywhere, when people are all looking in that area and they see everything? Like, you don't no matter what we did on that ranch, people saw it. We shot lasers in the sky. It was up on up on Facebook on the group. So there's something going on, activity at the ranch. We shot, rockets. We did, balloons or whatever it was, and people saw it. Lights, lasers. People saw it. There's no way that there's this crazy bright flash in the sky and somebody doesn't see it unless it was only seen by people that were on the ranch. And that I can't wrap my head around that. So those three things, along with other things, lead me to think that while the entire basin is a bed of activity, there is something special about the property that the ranch is at.
So one of the things, and you kind of touched upon it a little bit, and you had an idea of what the ranch was, at least what you were hoping it was going to be like when you got on it, eventually. Did it live up to the hype, or how was it different than how you, I guess, imagined it would be?
Well, I didn't see any aliens.
Were you hoping to?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the ultimate, right? I didn't see any aliens, Bigfoot, or ghosts, right? I mean, what I mean is I didn't see any phenomenon with my own eyes other than UAPs, which were like, you get bored of seeing after a while. There's so many of them. It's insane. I mean, I saw some, I saw things that we, with experiments, right? But I didn't see something that traditionally is thought of as supernatural, right? Because that to me is interesting, and I would have liked to seen that, but what I did see was mind-boggling. It was mind-boggling. I could never imagine. I mean, could you imagine the idea that you can go onto a property in real life and say, I'm going to see a UFO today, and shoot a rocket, and then moments later, there's the UFO. Like, I mean, it's insane. And so that was way beyond my, my expectation. Of course, everyone else was like, "Oh, something happens every week. You will see something happens every week." Absolutely, absolutely. So of course, I'm already like, okay, I'm good. I'm here long enough that I will see something. And then the amount of things that happened were just bananas. This was just bananas. I mean, from the UFOs to the we also sort of tracked a secondary story that along that season, and that I think probably was what was most fascinating, which I never expected, is that it appeared, and this, the current season went into this even more. There was something going on inside that mesa that that was connected to UAP sightings, and when the reason we drilled where we drilled in my season was for multiple reasons. Kevin Bartell had said, this was an area where he had seen caves when he was a Bigelow guard or Bass, OSAP guard there. Probably one of the guys Ryan Skinner saw back in the day. We had GPS experiments, multiples that for some reason showed GPS units while we were up in the air, or they were up in the air, that the GPS showed up in the mesa, at the same spot where these caves were seen. And then there were some other things that took place. It was like X marks the spot, right? And so we went and started drilling, and then, hitting that object, and then Tom Lind having the heart issue was scary. It was really, really scary. And that was one of those. It was one of those. You go from giddy and excited to now this is terrifying, right? Just like Thomas experienced with the issue with his head. Thomas also with his heart issue was scary, because you want to see something, you want to experience something, but then there's like actual real danger. How far am I willing to go? I don't want to be, I don't want to have a heart condition or a tumor in my head because of my excitement over this kind of stuff. So it got scary from that. But when we were drilling, and at the moment, there was a moment where we weren't drilling, and I was on the top of the mesa while they were looking in the hole with the camera where we had, found something. And I distinctively felt that mesa shake. And then, there was noises like trees falling on the other side of the property. And then when Travis was there, and Travis was down at the bottom, and he, just before he had seen that UAP, he felt like an earthquake there. And so there's something going on with the UAP and that mesa that I want to say it's really as if they are coming from inside the mesa. And I think the reason I have trouble saying that kind of stuff is I think it's sort of a pedestrian, but maybe a archaic sort of way to think about something, right? Because we have such a non-existent understanding of the potential science of these things, that to think of them in terms of sort of our physics is probably doing no justice to the actual science. So when I say UAP coming out of the mesa, who knows what that even means? It could be that this thing is interdimensional, sort of wormhole, or maybe it's inside of space there and it's passing through something. I don't know. Maybe the inside the mesa for them, or wherever it's coming from, isn't even here in our reality, right? Maybe that's just a transfer point. I don't know. I think about Buckaroo Banzai, right? If you ever see that movie where they go through the mountain and they come out with that, that device, and that they go through the mountain device, come out that thing. Who knows? So I was not expecting that. I was definitely not expecting this shift in my understanding and belief that and I started was going there a little bit, but the ranch, I guess, solidified my belief that UFOs are not traveling linearly from outer space across the galaxy to here. That there's some other there's some other place. God, I stumbled over because we don't have the language for this stuff, right? I don't think that they're coming from a place as much as a reality. So dimensions, maybe they are operating from another dimension. Maybe they're just somewhere else on Earth and they're able to move in instantaneously from spot to spot some way. Maybe they're not even from here. Maybe it's another place, but maybe it's just here in another way. Maybe it's sort of this multiverse idea. Maybe it's a not just parallel worlds theory, but interacting parallel worlds theory. I don't know, but I think less and less that our physics can define it. And that doesn't even also take into account military and private, contractor technologies that could be at play here as well. I don't know. So, but I wasn't expecting. So I always believed when I went to one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to go to Skinwalker Ranch is because throughout my experiences over the past quarter decade, I truly believe that there's a connection between UFOs, aliens, cryptid monsters, and ghosts. And for a long time, I would say maybe we're just getting a glimpse through temporary windows and sometimes doorways into other spaces, places, or time. And whatever these phenomena are, we're just getting a glimpse for a moment. And then at the ranch, I started to wonder, well, what if in some other space, place, time, reality, dimension, or whatever, there's some scientists who are interacting with a space that they have in their reality that's got a bunch of weird shit and phenomenon going on at it. And we shoot a rocket and in their world, they see some kind of light. So they send a drone to investigate it. We see a UAP. It's just their drone figuring out what our rocket is. Right. But the biggest mystery that I think about the ranch is why do things that shouldn't stop working suddenly stop working for no reason at all? And that leads me sort of to my other idea. I've always believed that, UAP or UFOs tend to show up to suss out potential danger, right? Is this a danger to the environment? Is this a radiation leak? Is this missile going to blow up? Is this something that we as probes need to check out to see if this is a danger in some way to something that we find important? A practical way of looking at it is, let's say, a fucking million years ago, sorry for my language, a long time ago, there's some ancient, non-human gold mining operation or, some other element mining operation going on the planet that's remote, and it's all this equipment. And, if you look at the Earth in terms of long periods of time, it's a very unstable planet, right? With all the Earth changes and shifts and weather and earthquakes. And so maybe there's this equipment mining, and there's these probes that are keeping tabs on the operation. And if something looks like it's going to be a danger to the equipment in the operation, it reports back to home base, potential danger here. Or they've been programmed to say, if you perceive or given a command that something is a threat to whatever's important to us, neutralize it. And so the way to think about that would be, well, what if these things are, like a partial artificial intelligence, but they take commands on a a telepathic level? And just a sidebar on that, I believe a lot of it has to do with quantum entanglement. I think that a lot of what we experience is quantum entanglement, because quantum entanglement, while we know that objects are affected at a distance, we don't know the means by which they are affected, which tells us that there is something happening outside of our observable universe, because we don't have physics to explain it, and our physics explains our observable universe. And so I believe that there's a form of quantum entanglement through all paranormal, right? When you see a ghost, see hitchhiker stuff. I think that there's just a connection that's consciousness on a quantum level. I spent a lot of time with near-death experience people and did many, for TV, a lot of deep dives into the near-death experiences. And there's a lot of parallels to the movement of what appears to be consciousness during the time of death and transmission of information that we now see as like a quantum level, right? So what if these UAP are receiving commands from the closest thing they have to their original commander, which is some sort of brain. So they're looking to us, to the humans on that ranch, for commands. But because we're not the programmers, our thoughts are being misconstrued as commands, and they're getting it wrong, right? Because we're not programmed, or not the right DNA or whatever. So we are heavily focused on this rocket and what this rocket is going to do for us. And this rocket, look at this rocket. Oh my God, this rocket, we're going to do this rocket. This thing comes out and it knows, okay, that object that we're all focused on, the rocket, they're telling us, humans are telling us, that's a threat and we need to neutralize it. That's why the rocket blows up, because this thing is doing its job as a defense system to neutralize what it's perceiving we're telling it is a threat. And so it's a far out there idea, but it's honestly not that crazy when you think about all the stuff that goes wrong with equipment that shouldn't. And the only, because like you're like, well, maybe someone knows what's going on, and there's no way they can know everything that's going on. They would have to be reading our minds. So maybe these things are some sort of, like I said, just aerial, worldwide reconnaissance or defense mechanism. And I've noticed, and sort of what I've been working on lately was that there's a lot of the spherical orb-shaped metallic type UAP seem to be the one of the types of UAPs that's common around the world, all over the world. And I think there's a reason for that. I think that they are interconnected. And I did this project a couple of years ago, a doc in Hudson Valley, New York, which is, the UFO capital of the world, called Alien Invasion Hudson Valley. And I went and I met with a lot of people who had experiences, abduction scenarios, and all different sorts of things. And something that didn't make the doc, but that was really interesting, is I spoke to a guy, Patrick Jackson, in the UK. He's an engineer, and he developed something called, we were calling it the atomic light reactor, which he believed was a strobe light with a cone system that at a certain frequency, he believed it called in UAP, and he could, also scramble them. And something that really interesting that Patrick talked about was that there's these power centers around the world. And traditionally, people have flocked to them, whether they plant their crops there because they grow better there than other places, or they have, burial mounds or worship sites or churches. It's places of great energy and feeling, and power centers. Also very, quote unquote, haunted, a lot of these places. And Patrick had a very interesting theory where he's like, look, they're power centers because below ground is where this relay system is that is gathering the information from these devices, ancient devices around the world, these spherical UAP. And then those information gathering centers are transmitting that information to wherever it's got to go, outer space, another dimension, whatever, through some sort of potential quantum information exchange. And if you are caught in the wake of that quantum information exchange, you're going to experience a lot of things, because it's changing the fabric of reality just by the effect of the transmission. So you may be in a space that suddenly you're in that space, and because this transmission is taking place, you're now seeing some lady from 100 years ago in your kitchen next to you, right? Because it's messing with time and space. You're seeing creatures that don't really exist there. They're in another time or space, but you're again, doorways and windows opening up momentarily. So a lot of what I saw on the ranch makes me believe that sort of thing is way more possible as an explanation, and that the idea that little green men behind the controls of a ship flying across the universe at warp speed is much less likely than some sort of dimensional, transdimensional, interdimensional technology that we can't even fathom what that even means yet. Is taking place, which to us looks like super fast movement or instantaneous space. And again, I don't think that explains everything, because once you start accepting the possibilities of one thing being true, you have to sort of start accepting possibilities that many things are true. And so I just talk about that being the scenario, maybe more for what's going on in the area around the ranch and over the ranch.
So I want to backtrack just for a second. So let's talk about the drilling for a minute, right? Like, everybody who's a fan of the show knows what they found the metal fragments that they pulled out from the drill site when they were doing the parallel drilling. And then the general consensus of the show seemed to be like, well, that's interesting, but nobody really expounded on that. So I'm curious if you have any personal things that you can share, conversations that were had about what the hell that those metal shavings that they pulled out of the mesa really were, and what the hell are they doing there?
So this is the show moves fast, right? Blink and you miss important information, but it's also, because it is a television show, and it's, we want it to be accessible to everyone. There's a limit to how much science you can put, right? You can go into. And so from what we saw with that, it's, if you don't have a baseline object or something to compare something else to, then you cannot define it if it's unknown, right? So the metal, the most interesting thing about the metal was that you could say everything that was in those metals is found naturally on Earth, although one of the elements is more prevalent on the moon and is very rare on Earth. But what you look at, and this has been something, this goes back to the 80s and the 90s, this idea that metamaterials, these exotic materials taken from crash sites, don't have compounds not found on Earth, but these compounds are constructed in ways that have never been put together on Earth. Right. So meaning like that those metals, even if the piece had a different composition on either side. Right. And so there was no explanation for something that exists that we know of that would do that. And then the way in which those materials, those elements were, compounded and put together, suggested a heating process, which could be manufactured, right? You could say, well, heating could also be natural, right? An impact scenario. Not an asteroid, because it lacked, I think, nickel, which is prevalent in asteroids. So if it was an impact, what was it? Because again, it wasn't a compound or a composition that we have in a catalog for anything here. It had elements of things we have, mostly related to space and aircraft technology and spacecraft technology, but it was not something where you could say this is what it is. And the way it works is there is a catalog. When you analyze material and you get the composition of elements, there is a catalog that you could say, not only do I know what type of object this comes from, but let's say it's from an aircraft, the exact aircraft it came from, right? Because that's how the science is. And there just wasn't anything for that, at least not at the time, that we could find. And so bewildering, and it's bewildering that we bring guys out to this place who are, there's nobody better than them at what they do, and no matter what the field is. And you've got drillers, and it's like, you gotta remember, we're in Utah. There's oil drilling going on and gulsonite and all kinds of other stuff all around us. These guys aren't bringing their Fisher Price drill. They're bringing the drill that goes through anything.
Right.
And it's not going through something here in this mesa. And you would think if that happens, that drillers in this area would say, we see this all the time. This is such and such. But they're legitimately like, there's no explanation I have for that. That shouldn't be happening. And all you can do at a certain point is you laugh, because it happens every day. You want to be like, dun, dun, dun. I got chills. But no, it's so frequent and common. You're just like, it's just a roadblock to answers. It's not, it's no longer about the mystery. It's about how do you get answers in the face of such mystery.
I know that one of the things that is said all the time, and it's actually kind of seemed to have become a running joke, is the whole getting over the walking is like, you're not going to believe this. And now I even heard Thomas say, like, I know you're going to believe this, but you're not going to believe this. And that always comes up. But I mean, so I got a quick question just about your own personal take on that metal, just before we go to intermission. Do you think, because I know that the whole kind of concept of the metal is, like what they would use on the space shuttle, for their heat tiles. Is it possible that could be kind of flipped over and meant to mask heat or mask signal or something that would be able to sense if something's there?
Potentially, but again, without knowing what that thing would be that is a masking object, you wouldn't, there's no way to formulate sort of a working theory or hypothesis without being able to test for that. And you can't really do that with little pieces of flakes of metal, right? You'd have to build something and construct something, which is just not, I don't think in the budget at that point. But I get your point. Could there be something in there that's covered up? And whether it's covered up to be protected from elements, or it's covered up to be, protected from other interference, could that be what's flaking off? Maybe. There's no, you can't really tell. I mean, you could probably take those pieces of metal and, run a current through them and say, oh my God, it's conductive or not conductive. But that's not going to tell you anything, because it's when you're looking at a minimum, 400 foot long, dome shaped object, and you've got a flake of metal this big, there's no way to say, you can't CSI this thing and reconstruct the dome based off of this little piece of metal, or
Right.
flake of metal. You need more. And that's the science and exploration of it. So possibly, could it be something, hiding something or shielding something? Who knows? Again, it's like the what ifs. They're endless. You could all, and that's why, there's something I really respect about Travis and Eric and Brandon, those guys with the ranch. And it's something I initially was a little bit disappointed in. There is no looking at the paranormal there. It's not, they don't entertain any of that, and the reason is it's sort of a fruitless effort for science, right? Because you need to be able to look at things that, you can develop an experiment for, and then from the results develop a hypothesis or theory. And so you need to have repeatability, and you need to have an experiment. And it's just not, where are you going to get to if you're looking at ghosts? It's not productive to the conversation of the science of Skinwalker Ranch or what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, in that regard, right? So, I originally was like, get into all of it, but no, they very much focus on science. And so, to the point about the metal, you've got to pick and choose. And I know there was more done after the fact to that in this season, but you've got to pick and choose what's the worthwhile effort. When it's not unlimited money and time and resources, there's a limit on it. And so, and it's also what has the potential to yield the best results, best being results that lead towards some ultimate theory or hypothesis that can then be tested in multi-year, approach. So, maybe that metal is covering some up, but until there's a way to try to investigate that aspect of it, who knows?
Gotcha. Well, perfect timing. All right. So we are going to go to intermission, and we will be right back on the other side.
This is Susan Slaughter from Paranormal Caught on Camera, introducing you to the most epic show ever, The Odyssey Files with David Soyering and Michael O'Neill. You're welcome. Pew, 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 pew.
Hey, this is Grant Wilson from Ghost Hunters, and if you ever have time that you never want to get back, spend it listening to Mike and Dave on the Odyssey Files.
This is Heather Taddy of Paranormal State and Alien Highway. I can't say that the Odyssey Files are out of this world, but Mike and Dave are quite abductable.
Hey, this is Dustin Perry from Ghost Hunters, and you're listening to Dave and Mike on the Odyssey Files. It's not the best show you're ever going to listen to, but it's also probably not the worst.
This is Michelle Belanger, author of The Dictionary of Demons. What is faster than a speeding shadow person and more fun than an anal probe? It's Mike and Dave of the Odyssey Files. Hold on to your hats and buns.
This is Elizabeth Saint. You know, in my journeys, I've confronted an over 1,000-year-old demon from the depths of Shepherdstown. But then, you know what happened? I came across Mike and Dave. And hot damn, nothing could have prepared me for the Odyssey Files. My second favorite radio show. I love you guys.
And we are back. Mark hasn't made it back to his chair, so I took him out of the show for just
Take him out of the show while he's on a little bit of a personal break. Yep.
a quick minute. So once I see that he has returned, there's no point in having an empty chair.
No,
being on the thing. So I guess while he's gone, let's take a brief moment to talk about upcoming shows. I mean, obviously, Mark's here for the full 2 hours, but longtime listeners, and if there are any new time listeners, we do listener stories and questions for people who have anything in the paranormal. And if you have anything like that, odysseyfilesradio@gmail.com, or just DM any of our social pages, and we'll add you to the list, and we'll do our best to answer your question to the best of our ability, as we do each and every week.
or like we always say, or like we've been saying for a long time, and we'll answer it privately if it's a personal question and
yes.
you don't want it to be something that is put on the air due to personal reasons. That's perfectly cool with us. I probably would have some questions that would be more of a personal level if I were sending them in, and I wouldn't necessarily want them discussed on the show either. So, but I would like an answer for them, type of thing, So if that is the case, and you just want a personal response, we're here for that too. Been doing this for a long time, so a lot of different experiences to pull from.
I mean, and keep in mind that all of our stories are confidential. It's not like this comes in from, Kathy Anderson.
No.
The San Fernando Valley. I mean,
right.
It's this person,
right. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, right. We don't disclose like area and personal information. It's all always kept private. So
exactly. So future shows coming up.
Yeah, future shows. Witchcraft.
Poltergeist, Poltergeist coming up in a couple weeks. Mark actually just reminded me of a show that we haven't talked about in a long time, and that's NDEs, near death experiences.
Yep.
We've been wanting to do a show on that for a while, but I mean, for anyone that's listening, if you guys got a topic you'd like us to cover, we're more than happy to take that on. Challenge accepted.
Absolutely. I was thinking about something, from all the years of research and time that I've spent kind of interested in Skinwalker Ranches. Back in the day, that road that cuts through the ranch is a county road. It's not a private road. And until they actually petitioned to have that shut down, and taken off the list, so to speak, you used to be able to drive that road. So people would actually be able to go try to experience some of the stuff that was happening on the ranch. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I think Thomas is the person who implemented that. He's the one who was like, we got to put some security level here so we don't get overrun. And probably knowing that how they were going to move forward and what they were going to try to accomplish moving forward, that was probably a really good idea. But it would have been cool back in the day had you been able to just, that road was open and just be able to kind of cruise that road, not necessarily get on the property, but if you stayed on the road, you're really, you're not trespassing. Same thing with the river too. I don't think you can't own the river. You can't own the river. So somebody could walk up that river that's on there. Just thinking like people are like, ways to get on the ranch.
Yeah, let's not do that. We don't need to give anybody any sort of
well, I'm sure I'm not the first person who's thought of that. So
no, probably not. Or even tried it.
No,
So-
I'm not going to try it. But
All right. Mark is back. Welcome back, Mark.
Hello. So, speaking of metals, and we'll get into this later if you want to talk about it, show you guys something that I found out in the desert.
nice.
Um,
What is that?
I don't know. So, out in the middle of nowhere.
Big
out
piece
there.
of something, man.
Yeah, I mean, it originally looked like kind of slag, but the top looks like a very kind of rare meteorite, actually, but doesn't have nickel in it or iron. I have to still get an XRF scan of it, but two different scientist types, including Eric Bard, I talked to, said it looks like it's something that burned up upon re-entry into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then crashed into the ground. So this came from outer space.
Sweet.
It didn't originate there, but it came from outer space somehow. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, I was
That's
looking
what I
for
would say too.
UFOs.
It looks like something that melted in an extreme heat crash site, or like you just said, melted coming back into re-entry.
Right. I mean, where I found it, there's nothing else there. Like there's no like burned out cars or there's nothing. And this is like,
Is it lightweight? I mean, it looks like it's pretty lightweight.
It's heavy. It's not very heavy, right? It's lighter than it feels like it should be for how strong it is. It's got aluminum. It does have iron, not nickel. Aluminum, iron, silver, and that's as far as I got. But if you look at this kind of part up here, like it's oxidized, right? So I can clean it, and when it's wet, it's all shiny, kind of like that gray. But if you scratch it, it's shiny underneath, like tin. But you can't. I mean, this thing is like I slammed this thing on concrete, and it's like and nothing, and it's
not given, huh? Wow.
So and it's non-ferrous, not magnetic, which would suggest aircraft metal, right? So I just have to get an XRF scan of it, and then Bard's gonna give me his take on it, and we'll see. But yeah, this could be this is something from outer space. So one guy, an engineer who looked at it, said that it looks similar to the type of debris that they're still finding from the Challenger explosion in Florida.
And they think they made it all the way out to the west coast somehow?
No, just the same type of debris.
Oh, same type of material.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Like a aircraft grade, metal that burned up and melted.
Well, I guess
So-
that's
Underground.
Let's all right. So that's a perfect transition for one of my
I
questions.
don't know what
right
it
there.
is, so I always wash my hands after.
I don't blame you. I'm
I don't
thinking
leave the
alien
house.
virus. I'm totally what I'm thinking. There's like alien virus,
Yeah,
some sort
well, I
of
mean-
like little bug on it that like our
Like, I
bodies
keep-
can't defend against.
I keep kind of like leaving it out, wondering like if any men in black are going to come and try to take it because it's that important, and nobody's come for it. Nobody's trying to rob me of it, so
That's
maybe
cool.
it's not that. Maybe it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, until the show, and then the black vans will pull. The black SUVs are coming tomorrow,
Right,
man.
right.
Yeah. So, what's your take on why there is a covert military presence that seems to be appearing at the ranch, like the Chinook that came that wasn't sending out the signal, that did the flyby, the Blackhawks that came over the ranch. The fact, it shows the guys on the ground saying, "Hey, we're being surveillanced." Brandon even said, "Do we need to back off this shit so that the guys in the black SUVs don't show up at the door and shut us down?" So, wrapping that all up, like, what's your take on what the hell the military is doing there?
I don't honestly, like, I don't know because, again, without knowing exactly who or what it is, it's hard to say that it's even anything nefarious or not, right? Or covert. I mean, remember my season that I was on there, the whole time Travis was chief scientist of the UAP task force, and none of
Right.
us knew about it.
Right.
Right? So, that's just the way it works. You don't know. I would think that there's a lot of, I'll tell you this, there's a lot of curiosity about the ranch from people in government. We had, people come out to the ranch, and even somebody I don't think can get mentioned, but high ranking people that are very curious because when, the UFO disclosure happened and then the report came out about the ranch, and the ranch was the impetus for ATIP, right? I mean, it was because of the report that came out of the military investigation of the ranch where they started the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. But that's more because that's the only thing Congress would listen to, right? You couldn't come out and say there's parallel dimensions and beings and things going on. Nope. But you could be like, oh, there's unidentified aerial threats. Okay, great. We can spend money on that. Right. So, there is a lot of curiosity. I would not be surprised if, in one of those helicopters wasn't somebody very important who was like, hey, let's fly, on our way from the base to Salt Lake or wherever we're going. Can we fly over Skinwalker Ranch? I really want to get a look at that place for fun. I don't know. I mean, it's the first day that we were on the ranch when I was out there, or the first day of filming when we did the kickoff meeting, right? We had former governor there and everything. That was the day that there was the National Science Foundation, NSF plane flying over the ranch in a pattern of surveillance. And, we submitted, FOIA requests for what that was doing over us and never heard back. And the only reason you don't hear back is because they must answer you, even if they're going to deny it, unless it was not a military operation, but was a privately contracted operation, in which case protection of IP, right? Yeah. And from what I understand, the government will sometimes do these private surveys to get around FOIA, meaning they'll say, oh, hey, Lockheed Martin, we have a contract that only you are going to bid on to fly to do this, a survey of such with such and such or whatever, right? And so then, the contractor gets they get the contract, and because it's technically a JPL or Lockheed or Skunk Works or whoever, then the public has no right to know what they were doing. And so I think that's a possibility. So, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I think that I would tend to think that the military was going to be surveilling the land they would be a little bit less obvious about it than flying right over like that with that intent. Unless they needed to for some reason. I don't know. I mean, it's so hard to say. But look, I think at the end of the day, it's not a secret that there's still government and military interest in that property. To what extent, I don't know. But certainly, I think that, you guys know the story about why the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, got involved and why they started the research on the ranch with Bigelow. Do you know the story? Knapp. It was in Knapp's recent book and the co-author is the guy who went out there. But it was basically Robert Bigelow, from my understanding, at the time was friends with Harry Reid, Senator Harry Reid, because Harry Reid had been like his lawyer beforehand or something like that. And a physicist with the DIA heard about it and said to Reid, "Would you reach out? Love to go out and check the ranch out." And so he got invited out for Bigelow, and he came out, and within the first 10 minutes, behind someone's head saw something like a moving, like, figure 8 infinity sign kind of thing. I think that's the story. And he's a physicist, and realizing what he saw had no sort of explanation within our laws of physics, he went back and went to his superiors and said, "There's something going on there. We have to check out. This could be of vital importance to us." And that was, the reason. And then within that grant, or that study, the research that the military did there, they spent a few $100,000 or so, or a couple $1 million on independent research studies that were not, necessarily physical on the ranch. And like, they were things like transdimensional travel and all kinds of other stuff that's just science fiction in a lot of ways. So if they found a connection to some of these events and physical scenarios there and these other things, then maybe there's still ongoing interest to sort of figure out what it is. Or is it strictly the UAP? Is it strictly trying to figure out, are these, some bad actor, or are these, from somewhere else, off world, or whatever we're calling it now. So maybe there is, maybe they had some equipment, but it's like, if they have equipment and they're going to use it to survey the land, wouldn't they do it when there's nobody there? Where it's,
Yeah.
Or not that there's not always like at least Eric there, but wouldn't, so I don't know, generally I think from a lot of TV shows and movies I've watched, my understanding would be that the military, the military is there when they want you to know they're there.
Right.
And you don't know they're there when they don't. Right. There's, it's like the Marines, like, come in as such a big, loud force that nobody ever fucks with them again. And it's not like, if you want to sneak around, it's teams for that too, and you never knew they were there. So if it's either somebody wanted the presence to be known, or it was completely mundane and coincidental in a lot of ways. Somebody says interest. I mean, everyone's interested, like from celebrities that go out there to government officials and politicians, like everyone's interested in the ranch, so it's not, maybe, Biden was flying overhead and was like, "I want to see what the ranches looks like," or why not, or somebody, high up was like, "Hey, can we take a pass over the ranch, Skinwalker Ranch? I always wanted to get a look at that place." Maybe they're just flying straight through the triangle, and maybe there's, maybe they have information that we don't have, that is time specific. Maybe there is phenomena that's happening at a very specific time and location. And so they're being sure that they're in the spot they need to be at the time they need to be, regardless of what else is going on, to get whatever data they need to get. It's so hard to, like, the what if game is just, it's rabbit holes, right? You never come out of it. So it's just so hard. So, I don't know. And I could generally formulate my own theory for anything, but when it comes to that, it's just too difficult for me to say that I know that I have any idea why they're interested, other than for it being the same reasons that we're interested in, or again, just things we don't have any idea about.
So I'm going to ask this question knowing that you've already answered it, but I want to take your kind of a side opinion on it. Now, Dave and I are paranormal investigators, and we have been for quite a long time. Dave, obviously, more so than me. But, we're under the, or at least I am, I don't want to speak for Dave, under the opinion that like what's considered the paranormal now is just science that hasn't been proven yet.
Yeah. I mean, Mark D'Antonio, who I worked with, he's one of the first people to say, I've said it my whole career, my whole life, today's paranormal is just tomorrow's science. And so that's why I don't, it's funny because I just don't even use the word paranormal anymore. It's unexplained, meaning there's an explanation. We just don't have it.
Right. And so even I'm sure you know who Chuck Zukowski is.
Uh-huh.
And he's been on the show many times. And one of the times after the shows, we were just having a conversation about ghosts and stuff like that. And, he's talked about what you did earlier with aliens, Bigfoot, and spirits being, all in the same kind of paranormal triangle. But he told me, he goes, I wonder how surprised you would be if what you thought was a supernatural experience, or you were dealing with a ghost, was really an alien. And that kind of threw me for a loop because no, I hadn't ever thought about that. Now, you had said that Travis and Eric have completely thrown out the paranormal side of everything. And I get it. Because they want everything
not thrown out, but it's just not a focus of the show or the investigation.
Well, right. But in your opinion, do you think that they're limiting themselves? Like
and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. No, because we had these conversations about a lot of different things they did and wanted to do. And I'll say, look, I agree with something like, there's shadow figures in paranormal that, there's a lot of belief that these are interdimensional beings. One of the reasons being you can capture them with the EMCCD camera. And, that's something that I'm very, very into and big on. And when I went to Hudson Valley in New York, my theory was, look, you can hunt aliens the same way you hunt ghosts, so to speak, because there's no reason to believe that you cannot use the same detection and communication equipment, because whatever the method by which you're able to experience them that exists, if you take time and space out of the equation, then what you're left with is something that's the same as everything, in a weird way to say. So meaning, I don't mean to think that like every time you see a woman in 16th century clothing in a house that it's an alien, but I think that by default the way in which you look for ghosts would also reveal interdimensional beings. Stephen Greer's CE5, they do it, with infrared photography and you see these little beings between people and whatnot. So with Eric and Travis, and that investigation, I think that it's not a disservice, because so let's say best case scenario in that regard, that they developed, because we had an EMCCD camera out there for a while. It just, but it just didn't really, the way we were using it and whatnot, it just didn't yield any results. But let's say they do decide to go and, sort of traditional ghost hunt sense and capture an image of something that could be an alien. That's cool. That's amazing. But what does it do as far as providing answers that we're looking for from Skinwalker Ranch ultimately? And the answer is doesn't move the needle because it's not going to explain the how of anything. It's just going to say, well, there's beings here. Who are they? What are they? What do they want? Where do they come from? Can't answer any of that. None of that whatsoever. But, so then what happens? Then you're eventually coming back to, okay, now let's get back to work on what we can interact with regularly and measure with our physics, right? Because again, our physics is our understanding of the observable universe. And so those are the only tools we have. We don't have unknown physics. So where are you going to get? It'd be neat, right? It'd be really cool. It'd be amazing. You'd get, but as far as a scientific investigation or an investigation whereby which you're trying to ultimately achieve, a goal of understanding, that wouldn't do anything to move that needle. Just wouldn't.
So you've said this a bunch of times and you kind of skirt around it. So I'm going to kind of just throw it kind of straight out there. What's the end game? What is the end game? Because you haven't really pinpointed anything. You keep kind of going in a circle and saying, well, this isn't going to produce this. This isn't that important because of this. But like, what is it? If it was a perfect day and Travis and Eric are there, what do they want to have happen that they can put their thumbprint on it and say, yes, this is why we're here? What is that? What is that?
Yeah, so there's a reason why it sounds circular and evasive, because you don't know the end game. All you can do is gather data, and then at a point at which data is analyzed, an answer of what this data reveals will show itself. If you have an end game, then you are subject to data manipulation. Right? You have observational interference. If you go into it saying, I want to prove X, Y, or Z, then you're not going to gather the information that is going to be the most pure, that will give you the answer in the end. And to your point, to your question, there's the answer is different for a lot of people. Right. So I think that, you watch the show and you're hoping to get your answer out of what's going on at the ranch. Right. But for true scientists, the answer is, what they hope to achieve through massive data gathering and analysis over a long period of time, when the data is analyzed and compared, not just by them, but by others. So I don't think that there is I want to see an alien from anybody. I want to have, I think that, look, for guys like that, maybe the holy grail that is an easily digestible answer for everyone is a physical craft or physical, part of something, because then it can be analyzed. It could be completely, totally, 100% analyzed. And that's a bit of a scientific dream, right? I think, for me, the goal was, can we get to a point of communication? But communication assumes intelligence. So I'm making an assumption that I'm then going to bias my work with, because I want to achieve a certain result. And so I will be looking for intelligence where intelligence may not exist. Right. So that's why you can't do that. So, but I think that, a multi-step process is sort of like, observe, record, maybe contact, then communicate. I think that those are probably the greatest achievements that could come out of the ranch, because that would then provide the doorway to answers of who, what, where, when, and why. Right. I mean, the biggest question is, first is, are they real? Are there aliens? right? Are they real? That's the question that everyone has. And then if you goes to question 2, it's like, well, if they're real, then who are they? Where do they come from? And what do they want? And the what do they want is a scary question when you break it down. It's the dark forest theory. It's the, if suddenly a bunch of UFOs appeared in broad daylight stationary and we knew it was aliens, and they're like, okay, hey, we're here. It would go from, oh, wow, to, oh, shit. If they can do that, what else can they do to us? And then it becomes a very stereotypical human response. The fear of what they might do is going to cause us to make sure they can't ever do it.
Right. It's going to lead to military action.
Whatever. I mean, yeah, there's a million ways around it, but that's, because the safety is in just assuring they can't do it, even if they never intended to. Right.
Well, the fact that they're here, though, would make that almost be non-plausible, because of the fact that they have the ability to be here and they don't, if they don't originate from here, then what the hell are we really going to do about it?
I don't actually subscribe to the idea that what we're seeing are capable of military style.
I don't think they're interested in that, to be honest with you. If they were, why are they waiting? Like what's their end game? Why wouldn't they just come take what they want?
I don't think they are either, but getting back to sort of the where they're coming from and travel and the interdimensional theories, whatever is bopping around seems almost bare bones in a lot of ways, as if that's all that can come through or travel or move. It's limited, right? I mean, Bob Lazar talked about the incredible simplicity of the ship that he saw, right? I mean, Bob Lazar, another guy, everyone said, cuckoo, crazy, what a whack job. Oh, there's no such place as Area 51, and there's no such things as UFOs. And then suddenly everything he ever said about them is really plausible, plausible. But anyway, so I think when you have an investigation the level of Skinwalker Ranch, there is no end game that is something that's super tangible, which is why, there's no, I can't say what it is. They can't say what it is. I think that, it's the what we would like is personal. That's a story about, the human condition, right? Because it's different for all of us, what we think, what we want to have come out of it. For me, like I said, and the guys were down with this, but like I went into it like, I think that you guys have, successfully triggered and in a way made contact. Can we figure out how to communicate? And then when we got, the signal from the 1.6, it's a communication signal. Now that could mean satellite communication or whatever, but the signal, the sound, the frequency, the modulation is indicative of communication systems. So now then wouldn't the next step be, okay, well, what are we supposed to do with this? Are we supposed to fire it back? Are we supposed to use it to form a language? Are we supposed to try to use it to talk? Or is it non-intelligent and it's just one system trying to gather information from the other system and we're in the middle of it? There's I always say this, we work in steps, and whether you could say it's you could say that it could be intentional disclosure or not, but we understand more about these types of phenomenon in baby steps, and right now we're at just the physical craft baby step. And so I think that the next big evolution of information is going to be when someone gets their hands on one, it's going to be unmanned, right? It's going to be an object like the Bet Spear or something, right? That seems to have the ability to maneuver and move on its own, but we don't know how or why. And then it's going to come from deciphering that technology. Is it receiving a signal? Is it self-generating? Is it AI? Blah, 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 blah. And that's going to sort of lead to an understanding of physics beyond what we understand now that will then allow for the next. So I think we talk about dimensions, and for I think 99.999% of the population, we have no idea what that means because we try to picture it, right? We try to imagine what does dimensionality look like. If we live in 3 dimensions, what does the 4th look like? And it's not something we can imagine, and because we have no reference for it because we don't exist in that way. And so I think that you look at something like look at every Marvel movie and a lot of other TV shows and movies that are all about the multiverse, right? I'm sorry, but we know that the government has had a heavy hand in entertainment for a long time, and I think that there's an intentionality to that reminds me of the space race, which was in a way designed to stimulate the sort of engineering curiosity of children to lead them into wanting to becoming, engineers and develop next generation propulsion systems and whatnot. And I think that, when you talk about sort of plans for the planet, you look at centuries, you don't look at, years, just a couple of years. And so you look at generational. And I think that, there's probably this movement right now that's getting children to think about physics, the quantum realm. We're on the quantum realm for everything, like trying to get them to start thinking about these things so that their minds can develop their understanding of science with that imaginative element to it, so that they then go into more theoretical physics and try to develop it. And so along while children are getting that interest in science towards a theoretical physics or a quantum physics type of pursuit, at the same time, we're going to see what we understand, a physical craft, and it having properties of movement that we're trying to understand, so that those children, when they're adults, are able to understand those things and sort of decipher them. Look, that may be going on now. I don't know. There's a lot of stories, right? It may be going on now, but I think that we need a lot more people, a lot more children interested in science of that sort of magnitude to be able to develop the language that allows us to explain to one another what the phenomena is that we're seeing. And this is the issue with it. It is, and I can feel your pain. It's abstract because we don't have any frame of reference. We don't have anything tangible to put it up against. It's like, what's the metal? Well, if it's not in a catalog, we don't know what it came from.
Right.
It's the same kind of thing. And so, the end game, I think, to just circle it back for Eric and Travis and Brandon, again, I think it's different. It's different for everybody. Why Brandon wants it. Eric is very much a purist. He believes in, I gather data by mountain loads of data so that others can analyze it, but thereby the group experience of data analysis brings results through correlation and comparison that would then tell us a little bit more about what the phenomenon is, which would then lead us to develop more intricate experiments that would yield results that would tell us more. But along the same timeline, we've got to progress our understanding of science that we don't understand. Otherwise, when you have the data that is the answer, you won't know it's there because you still don't know the question. Right? We need better tools. We need to build a better toolbox. We need a better language. And it's got to happen simultaneously, because if we get evidence too soon, we won't know it. We won't understand it.
It makes me think of the data packets, right? That totally makes me think of the data packets. Like, that could be the answer right there. Like, that could be a communication that says, hey guys, can you please stop shooting the rockets at us? We have been pleasant about it so far, but like you've even said, right, don't poke the bear, don't poke the hornet's nest. You poked it. We're doing non-lethal things to shut you guys down, but please stop doing it. I mean, that could be the answer that's in the data packets at the 1.6 gigahertz.
Could be. It could be
but we just don't
scientists-
understand how to decipher it.
Right. It could be scientists on the other side of whatever the
Right.
wall is who are
Right.
just like, hey, let's share information
Right.
about
Right.
this space that we're able to somehow be a part of. Who knows?
Right. And the
knows?
same thing with, the signal that we send could be sending data packets to them, and they could be having the exact same problems that we're having. So,
Yeah, it's a big what if, right? It's just a
Right.
big what if. And I think that what's important is to look at the past as much as we look at the present. I think that a lot of clues live in the ancient sort of societies and the
Right.
whether it's the different indigenous people for that area or all over the world. There are definitely clues, but again, they're not going to be answers because the people that recorded those clues are not going to have an understanding either of what they were looking at or seeing.
Right.
And so we've got to look at it through those lenses. But, I think that you can probably find through some of those clues ways in which to conduct yourself or experiment and to look for information that provides something that we can understand.
Okay, so I just have two questions that I want to get in. They're probably pretty quick. So, you were around for probably all of the malfunctions. As we had talked about that, and their computers going down, and everything malfunctioning. Did your cameras ever malfunction?
All the time. All the time.
And just like everybody else, just battery drain.
There are so many cameras so that the malfunctioning ones don't ruin the show, right? I mean, that's the joke of it. Like, and I feel bad because Brandon always wants to show that more and more and more. But it's like we just, it becomes again a one-trick pony. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. But you sort of break that wall. But constant production equipment issues, from microphones and walkie-talkies and cameras to things that drones and lights and just everything you can imagine, vehicles, and you bring it home with you, right? I mean, I came home for a weekend, and my wife's phone immediately started doing the stuff that you see has happened to people on the ranch, and it went like skitzed out to where it was like the screen was like all the different colors and lines to where it was unusable, and she had to get a new phone. We were in the production trailer one day, and me and the two other producers, other EP and co-EP, were on a phone call with the Los Angeles office, and an associate producer at the other end of the trailer. He was on, he was making a call to like a vendor or something like that. And when he dialed the vendor's number, instead of it ringing to the vendor, it opened up the line to our phone call. And so now on his phone, the other end of the room, it's our call we're having on our cell phone in the other end of the trailer. Right. And so, that kind of stuff is just like every day in there. And then you come home and like my wife's phone skits out. And then I'm sitting there hanging out one night in my backyard with some friends and a guy in the fire pit. And he's a construction guy. And he's like, I tell him stories like, what? Get out of here. No way. And I'm like telling him about some, like, I forget what it was, but there was somebody's truck, it may have been the bulldozer thing, the battery or whatever. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, you don't think that they just didn't hook something up right or whatever? I'm like, we're talking about like military grade equipment, man. And people that like, there's no value in them coming on a national television show and not knowing how to use their equipment or it malfunctioning. That's like, they're coming on there to prove that their shit doesn't break down. And it does. And then the next day he calls me, says, and I was telling him about how, like, it follows you. What happened to my wife's phone? He's like, oh, whatever. Next day he calls me and goes, so, I've got my work truck. He's like, I put 2 brand new batteries in it this week because it takes 2 batteries because it's a big work truck. He's like, they're both completely dead this morning. I couldn't go anywhere. And he's like, there's no reason for that never happened. So, is that a connection? You're certainly looking for the connection. but is that connection? I mean, that kind of stuff, happens. Stuff. The joke was, you've been ranched. Because that's how frequent it is.
There's a perfect T-shirt right there, man.
Yeah.
You've been ranched.
And people think like it doesn't happen. I mean, it's so frequent that it's laughable, that it's like, you got ranched. Yeah, you got ranched. And it's like, not just on the ranch. Now you're at home. Anybody who's worked on the show and people that they're around, like, it's your shit is malfunctioning. You're like, you got ranched. So yeah, all the time.
Man, it must have been hard to keep everything going.
It's frustrating, right? Because you're like, this is the shot. This is the chance. So the perfect example was the night we had the telescope guys come out. These are, tens of thousands of dollars worth of telescope equipment these guys use professionally every day of their lives. Like, they're not like, oh, we don't know how to use this. And, if you saw that one, the computer system in that one telescope that he's dialing in, it's not connected to anything. It's not connected to Wi-Fi. It's got no input or output signal opportunity or equipment, right? It's got to be entered in the keypads, which is the same kind of thing like the phones, it's like when the phones are going through all the numbers are being pressed by something that's not there. You know what I mean? So
right, it's dialing.
Yeah. So, that thing, try to point it at the triangle, and instead of that, it starts deleting any constellations on the other side of the triangle. That's not something you would ever expect. You expect a malfunction maybe where it's like, oh, it won't move. Okay, I can expect maybe it won't move. But now it's deleting its database, and then we go manual. And then, of course, the laser splits up there and starts doing weird things that lasers can't do unless hitting an object or, water that's semi-solid. They can't do it just from thin air. In fact, Travis used to say NASA's been spending billions of dollars trying to make a laser split without an object, with energy, and they haven't been able to do it.
Is it fair to say that it would have to hit a metallic object in order to split, or can it hit any object and split, do you think?
No, I don't. I mean, maybe, again, that's a Travis thing more than me, but it would have to be like, it could be like, if you think about like water, like you get the same sort of optical distortions from water. So there's something probably with a reflective or lensing property, again, what is solid object mass, right? What do we not know about about the world or the universe, that there could be solid mass that we can't see, dark matter or something? I don't know, right? We don't know what it is because we can't see it, right? We can't experience it. But that when we went old school and said, let's just point the camera at him, and the guy had a video camera running on the DSLR with the video running. And after, the rocket and all that, the footage was just black. There's nothing there. It's not this guy's first time doing that, So just frustrating. And like, we had UAPX out, and Jeremy McGowan's Osiris rig kept, every time Travis said, 3, 2, 1, go, on one, it would shut down. And no matter what you think about that rig or the electronics or his capabilities, why would it only shut down on the word one every time, over and over again? What is that? So the malfunctions, exciting to some, frustrating, very, very frustrating from, not only trying to get an perspective, but making a television show. If something happens, it's like the amount of cameras we got to have rolling at all times. There's one time where I think it was when Travis saw that one thing, when the Mesa shook, that object, the first camera that Eric went to that's supposed to be pointing at it was pointing at the ground the whole time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you've got to have, but then the problem becomes, who's going to go through all that footage? Caleb was doing it. It's a lot. I mean, so there's probably stuff in there that nobody will ever even see. But so like I said, it happens so often that it's a running joke. But also, it's horrible when you're making a TV show and you're filming and you have those kinds of equipment malfunctions. It's it messes up your schedule because like suddenly it's like the camera isn't working anymore. Now this is a primary camera on a 3-camera shoot. It's got to be running, and now we need, now it's like, great, we got to take time to try to fix it, but we don't even know what really caused it and how long this is going to take. So you go get the other. It's always like, go get the other body, get the other lens, get the other this. And the ACs are running new equipment back all the time. It's what it is. Which is why my project that I've been doing, I actually was using analog photography equipment that's got no electronic components whatsoever. A lot for that reason.
Does the equipment work after, like when you take it off the ranch and you go to use it for another project? I mean, it's completely fine? No issue?
Works, dude. Everybody who brings their equipment from their equipment to our equipment, the second it gets off the ranch, the perfect example is when Eric went up on the Cessna, right? And as soon as they, approached the ranch, the signal disappeared from the GPS, right? That they were trying to be receiving down the bottom. But when you look at it, when they got it back and looked at it, it was fine on the approach to the ranch. And as soon as the plane entered the ranch, that's when the GPS changed. And I forget if it was her GPS that then showed up underground or Eric's that disappeared, whatever it was, but literally worked. And then when she left, it picked, and I don't think it was made in the show. When she left, the GPS came back on as soon as she got outside of the ranch and airspace and back to Salt Lake. Worked fine. I mean, come on. She cannot control that because that's, illegal. Right. Like it's heavily regulated. Like when we had the issue when we went and checked on that radio tower, and she was receiving interference through an output only antenna. You can't, like, this is so heavily regulated by the FCC. You can't, change the way the signal goes in or out or even have an in signal, but she was being affected by incoming transmission that she's not set up to receive. So those kinds of things happen with everything, with our walkie-talkies, with our IFBs where we listen, with the cameras, with with everything you could imagine. And it all worked fine the second you get off the ranch.
What is the percentage, would you say, from what happens on the ranch to what actually goes into the show?
10%.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like from a filming perspective and also from things that happen when it's not being filmed or not captured. The rule always, is that if you don't capture it, it doesn't get used because it's not a show about, oh, you should have seen what I saw.
Right.
Personal
experiences.
So that's just a disservice. And luckily there's enough that happens. You don't need that. Every once in a while you hear that because it's important to something that is happening. But it's not like that. So, you can imagine how many times people see things that doesn't get recorded and doesn't make it into the show. Or just there's too much. There's not enough time to put it in.
So that 90%, is it UFO alien type of activity, or is there anything in there that's like cryptid, ghosts?
I'd say like when I say 90%, I mean like,
presence.
I mean 90%, including like filming, so experiment stuff,
Okay.
but from a phenomenological sort of perspective, I'm trying to think, there's always a lot of weird animal stuff. You'll hear the guys talk about it sometimes, but again, if it's not captured, it doesn't make like a segment in the show.
Right.
So it may be mentioned, but it's not like a segment. So that happens a lot. There's animals that seem to be very large,
Like the dire wolf kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the giant footprints to the animal rubs
Right.
on the trees to
Or the predator thing. I mean, what the hell is that, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing that everybody's like, well, I saw it in the tree, but
Yeah.
it was there, but all it
Yeah.
was a vaporous kind of mist of a humanoid type figure, and then it moved, and we watched it, and then all of a sudden it was gone.
Right. So you'll get a story about that, right? But that's about it, because it
Okay.
wasn't captured, or, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
as far as what takes place, yes. I mean, it's you could go to the ranch. If you go to the ranch at any time in the year and you're there for a week, maybe not even 5 days, I would almost guarantee that you'll have some level of experience that goes beyond what you expected. Not
Invite accepted.
not like a mundane experience, but something, something that's really, sort of,
Stops you in your tracks, kind of.
yeah. It really does. It really does. And it makes you second guess what you see. And that's why the value is of the cameras, because there's something where you're like, you're so sure. And then after it's over with, you're like, but did I really see that?
Yeah.
Because is that even possible? Right. So you see a UFO and then you'll want to afterwards say, but could it have been a bird or a bug or a plane or a star? Even though you got the star map out and the ADSB and all this stuff, and it tells you no, but could it have been, even though it didn't do this and that, so you still try to rationalize it. Same way it ghost hunting, right? Like you're looking for the reason first that something is not a ghost, right? You're looking for the non-paranormal,
just a natural explanation.
Yeah, you're looking for the explanation, but
banging pipe, high EMF sensitivity, whatever it might be.
And so how many times do you have an experience at a location that's quote unquote haunted that you wonder, well, is it just because I think it's haunted that I think I had that? Because everybody thinks that I think a lot of people think that an experience is a big experience. In order to have an experience, you're going to see a full body apparition. You're going to see a craft land. And like a lot of other things, it's not about those individual experiences. It's about what you have when you look at the sum of all those experiences, right? It's like when somebody says to me, do you believe in ghosts, aliens, UFOs, whatever? I say, well, first of all, we may not agree on what the definition of that is. Second of all, very few people in the world, if any, have as much professional paid time into these phenomena as I do. And so for me to convince you that something's real when you don't have, 25 years of professional experience in it may not work. But I bet I could convince you it's true. And then 30 seconds after you believe it's true, I could convince you it's not. That's just the way the mind works, right? Because it's not known. And if it's unknown, you can go in a lot of directions. So, but I think it's the sum, it's the gestalt, right? It's the sum of everything. Again, back to your point, Dave, we won't know what the answer is until we have all the data in front of us to see it emerge, right? You're trying to put together a puzzle, but you don't have the cover of the box.
Gotcha.
Right? So you're just trying to, you're not going to know what it is until a picture forms.
Right.
And that's, I think, the best way of looking at it.
That is very good, because it visualized it for me. We're going for the edges first because they're the easiest. Then when we get to the middle, it's just a freaking cesspool until, without the box anyway, right? Until and then we're like, oh, we found a piece. Look at that. I got one to fit in the middle, right?
Yeah, because you have a frame of reference. What an edge looks like.
Right, exactly.
We know that in a two-dimensional rectangle or square, there is a corner.
Right.
We know our geometry in that. So it's math. We're using math. We're using science. We're using geometry because we know a rectangle has a corner, 90-degree angle. And so that gives us a starting point, you know? And so the guys can do the same thing. We know that signals should do this or that, or metals should look like this or that, or whatever, right? And so that's how you can start.
All right. Well, we have just a couple minutes left. So I wanted to have way more time than this, but that's okay. What are you working on now?
Well, I just finished a project, was in development with History Channel, where self-documenting myself going out looking for, trying to get a picture of a UFO. And I think I sent you the picture for the promo. You see that big, it's a camera on my shoulder. It's a World War II aerial reconnaissance camera. And my thinking is that, first of all, I think people need definitive proof to believe, but I also think that we need a very crystal clear image of a UFO to understand more about them. And so what I'm set out to do in that was try to get a clear picture of a UFO using large format photography, because that's what they used for aerial reconnaissance. It produces a negative, 5-by-2 negative this big, that when you blow it up, it's the size of, a wall, or, and then you look at it with the glasses, you can see all kinds of crazy details. And so I self-documented going out to the desert with that endeavor, which is how I came upon that medal that I showed you, which was just a completely, I'd say it's luck, but I was looking for UFOs in areas with heavy metal deposits because of a theory that these crafts need, they go to the areas with the metal deposits because these areas are highly conductive. The ground and the soil is conductive. And there seems to be a correlation between these spherical UAP and conductive soil. And so I found, based on where sightings were, and then a geological survey map, and then did a conductivity test, found an area to post up. And that's actually, when I was looking for UFOs, that's where I found that metal, which is weird, right? I don't know if it's fuel, or if it's a byproduct, or who knows what it is that, that's the relationship. But there seemed to be, because I went out there and I said, why here? Why in this part of Nevada there's so many UFO sightings? And so somebody's theory was that because of these minerals in the ground. And so I said, okay, we can sort of test for that. And saw some crazy stuff. I took my son out one day, overnight with me, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and saw just a bunch of banana stuff. Like, we had helicopters that were buzzing around all day in these two mountain ranges on either side of the valley we were in, and they weren't military. So I was like, maybe they're doing training exercises or something. And then as soon as the sun set, you start seeing things like, well, it could be stars. And so I had actually been developing something that helped with that. But we looked, wasn't stars, wasn't other airplanes, and then these things did some maneuvers. Then we see it disappears in the other mountain range. The same thing happens, and the helicopters come in, and then back over here, there's another object in the sky that did something and disappeared. And then over on the mountain, in the mid-mountain, there's an object, a bright light that's descending. And then later at the night, it's bouncing across the top of the mountain range. It's like banana stuff. And one of the things I did in that trip was I was trying to react quickly to UFO reports, because I believed that if I can be there within hours of where a sighting is taking place, maybe these things are regional in a way, and it'll come back to that area. But there was no real time UFO tracking, so I actually built one with the help of ChatGPT and AI. UFOProTracker.com is the prototype that I've been playing with, and this thing has a live map of UFO sightings. But what it does on there is allows you to check satellites, rocket launches, Starlink, airplanes, when you see something, before knowing if it's something unidentified, and then recording it and adding it and marking it. So something I'm working on. But anyway, so I self-documented, and the plan is, I'm looking at what I took as a starting point for a larger documentary exploration. So a larger exploration and documenting it. So not doing something for the purpose of making a film or a TV show, but doing what I do, what I'm going to be doing, and then also documenting it. So I'll be using what I shot as a teaser, but also to help do some crowdfunding to raise some funds for this exploration to be filmed. That's the next thing on my plate with this project is catch a UFO.
I understand. Well, if you do, you'll be coming back.
I'll come back anytime. Anytime
Awesome.
You guys want to talk.
Awesome. Good, because we still have so much more to talk about, and we're already out of time. So thank you for coming on, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll get you back on. Absolutely. Maybe we can get Travis or Eric right beside you.
Yeah.
and they can defend themselves, so you don't have to do it in their stead. But yeah, so we'll be back probably on Sunday at our normal time of 7 to 9 Central. Thank you, Mark, for coming on and joining this on this special edition.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, David.
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
you guys.
And yeah, stay healthy, stay safe. We want to see you back here in a couple days.
Will do.
Everyone have a great